Welcome back. This is part two of a series. I don't know how many parts it'll be in the end, but a short series talking about the story of me building my house, me, an architect, building my own house and ADU, and not coming from a wealthy background. So, how did I do it? Well, first off, I didn't do it alone. I did it with the help mainly of my wife and my mother in law. So it was a 3-person team, most of all, along with some friends stepping in to help where they could with strength and some tools and other things that are not money. That helped a lot. Well, the first thing we did is start clearing it of a ton of weeds. Then we moved our trailers onto the property because what are we going to live in? We had just been basically booted off the land we used to live on. So my wife found a great RV for a price we could afford, and we moved it on along with an RV that the kind man whose land we used to live on, an RV that he gave us so that my mother-in-law could live in it. All right, with the RVs there, and there was actually some prep work before that, putting gravel down. There's a whole bunch of stuff that went into getting the RVs there alone. But we got the RVs onto the property. Then we had to install water and electricity so that the RVs could use those. You just take them for granted on campgrounds, but we basically made 2 campsites on our property effectively. So that was an ordeal in itself, and learning a little bit about utilities and how it works to bring utilities on the land. As COVID was just going on the rise then, in about February of 2020, my wife and I looked at each other and we thought we really need to nail down the design of this house and of the ADU. We knew there were some guiding principles that were going to make it so we knew we were at least constrained how we could make the houses. One of them was money. Again, just like I talked about, money was a big deal in buying the land, in shopping for houses first and then buying the land ultimately. Now money, of course, continued to be a big deal while we were preparing the design of our house and my mother-in-law's house. Price not only affected the size of our house, the size of the ADU was not really constrained by price because it's limited to 1,200 per feet by the jurisdiction's code around here. What are some things that price directly affects? Well, one of them is the shape of the house. We were going for simple. The more complex a shape is, the more time it takes to build it. And with us being the builders, that's not necessarily a direct cost, but it's an impediment to getting to the goal when we wanted to get to the goal. And as inexperienced builders, we didn't want complexity. That was just something that was scary to us outside of price. So for that reason, we stuck with a simple shape for the main house, which is, of course, a rectangle. Basic, really anybody can frame it who knows anything about framing. Roof shapes also can be complex or simple. Of course, we went for simple because that directly correlates to the price of the roof. The trusses were going to be cheaper, and as it turned out, we hired people to put the actual roofing on our house, and so that was cheaper because it just took them less time, less material, cost less money all around. The shape of roof that we went then is as simple as possible, which is a single gable roof. That is just one triangle shape going from front to back. Very simple, very cost effective, covers a rectangle very well. So the shape of the house was directly influenced by the price, heavily. Also the layout of the house. My wife and I both really like open concept. We like to be able to walk from one side of the house to the other and not be impeded by walls or a hallway. In fact, I had a principle when it came to this. We were going to have a no hallway principle. Now, one big thing that affected the size of our house as far as price goes is the energy code around here. The lowest tier of the energy code was for houses at 1,500 square feet or less. And so we decided to go for 1,500 square foot house. Now, the great thing about that is garages and decks, basically outside space, are not part of that. So I'll get to why that's such a big deal in a moment. But I mean, essentially, as you can tell, they're spaces that allowed us to have a bigger house, so to speak. Another factor that weighed heavily on how we laid out the space was that my wife and I wanted kids, and in fact, we now have our first. Also, open concept lends itself to entertaining people. All right, like I said, deck and garage. We treated those two things specially. The deck, we made it big. Along with that, we put a glulam truss up top because we wanted some sort of decoration on this otherwise quite plain house. So at least as someone approaches the house from the front, it looks modestly beautiful. The garage also is a space that we paid special attention to because we knew since it didn't contribute to the Energy Code's 1,500 square foot limit, then we could basically make the garage as big as we want within our price range. And since garages are one of the lower cost areas of a house to build, we wanted to make use of that. With just these handful of puzzle pieces, we already had a good idea of the layout of the house. We made use of this being a custom house, something that ultimately I drew, and my wife heavily influenced the design of it. And part of that, again, with my no hallway policy, was that we entered through the garage. That's where the entry door is. And then we go into a stairwell upstairs. So it's kind of like an apartment complex where you park your car first and then walk upstairs to the units that are above the garage. Something that's a little unorthodox because we don't have a proper entry door, yet it works well. Now, why we don't have a proper entry door is because we planned this house to have 2 phases. Ah, there we go, thinking ahead. We didn't have enough money now, which was back then. But we figured we would be able to, in the rather near future, maybe 5-7 years later, build on an addition. And that addition is going to have a proper entry door, something that clearly looks like an entrance. But for now, we just wanted the simple, bare bones, what can we live with, which basically meant we had an apartment above a garage. Very simple layout, effective, little weird at the start for the years that's the only portion, but when it's all done, we're planning on it looking pretty great. It's going to look at least like a proper house that fits well on the property we own. All right, so all of that said, with those puzzle pieces figured out, how did we ultimately lay out the house? Well, I'll put a floor plan on the screen so you can see the way that our house is laid out. It's very simple. On the first floor, there's a garage. That takes up most of the footprint. That doesn't take up the full first story footprint, though. Of course, there's a stairwell in the corner. And then we have a plumbing room, is what I call it. It basically is a combination of a laundry room and a bathroom, so it has a lot of plumbing in it. So it's got sink, toilet, shower on one side, and room for cabinets, and then dryer and washer on the other, with an exit door outside, so that we could use it as a mudroom, with the idea that when people have dirty feet from doing yard work or playing outside with sprinklers or whatever, then they can come inside. We're not worried about it because it's a slab floor, and can shower off, just walk in the door, turn the corner, get in the shower with a towel, and there we go. Cleaned off, just like that. Very quick, direct, simple. We then put on the corner a bonus room, let's call it. It could be an office or it could be a bedroom, which when you put that together with the room right next to it, the plumbing room, bam, you have a simple rental suite. So there we go. It's a way to make money out of the house directly. That's the first floor. Let's now walk up the stairs to the second floor. This is our living suite. This is effectively like an apartment, like a 1-bedroom apartment. So we have the open concept living, kitchen, dining area. Got all 3 of those in its own little spot. So we've got the living area off to the east side. We've got the kitchen and the dining area off to the west. There we go. Open concept. Not really much more explanation is needed for that. It's pretty self-explanatory. Then in the back is the bathroom and the bedroom. That's it. 2 more rooms. Those are the only rooms. Those need to be private for obvious reasons. That's the layout of the house. Very simple. And of course, with deck on the front. Nice covered deck. We extended the roof out over the deck because, again, winters are terrible here, and it's nice to have shade in the summer. So, there we go. That's the layout of the house. Now for the ADUs design. Like I said, it's constrained by the 1,200 square foot maximum for ADUs around here, but we still wanted to make it work well for my mother-in-law. So what we ultimately ended up doing is putting a nice entry in front of the house and a carport on the side, because that does not contribute to the 1,200 square feet, and then the main part of the living area, and a covered deck in the back. Finally, with a laundry room that is detached, as you can see on this floor plan that I put on the screen. With that decided, I then went to draw it. I won't bore you with the whole process of doing construction documents. That's just, it just happened, let's just say. I hired a structural engineer as an extra precaution just to make sure that this house is sturdy because as someone who was not licensed at the time and certainly had a lot to learn in how houses are put together, I wanted someone who really would just assure me that the house is put together well. Now, one thing I will say about the process of making the design was that I used Revit, and I had been spending the previous few years really diving in deep in how to use Revit well and learning about its capabilities. And man, did that come in handy. And I'll talk more about that. But for now, I will say at least that even in the design phase alone, it didn't just help me make the construction documents. Rather, I also used it to show my wife the space in a way that she could understand. At the time when the drawings and all the permit documents were complete and when we submitted, we were very excited. And that was the start of the crazy roller coaster that we were just getting into the cart of. And I'll talk more about the start of construction in the next video. I'll see you there. Again, 1,500 square feet, it's definitely enough space for that. But the more kids you have, the... Sadie, quiet. Quiet.